Well, welcome to the Security Weekly News wrap-up show for the week of 2 October 2022. We got the size of my esophagus is revealed. SQL Server, Blackbyte, China, Mafiaware666, Linux, Meta apps is something else. Meta apps, IT repair shows, and all the show wrap-ups.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News.
Managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100 today, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Right now, everybody is talking about cryptocurrency, and the cyber criminals are hiding in the conversation. Cyber criminals use social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on your company, your employees, and your customers. Spear phishing is just one of the 13 types of email threats. Barracuda has identified 13 types and shows you how you can protect your company, your customers, and your reputation. Find out about the 13 email threat types and Barracuda email protection by going and getting your free ebook at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda. All right, I'm Doug White, and this is the Security Weekly News wrap-up show, episode 245. You know, yesterday was interesting because it was the first time, literally, I think since around 2018, that I had done a live performance in the Providence Business News thing. So I get my friend Lynn and Jason Albuquerque were on a panel, and I was standing on that stage yesterday before things started. And I was like, wow, is this like the first one of these I've done? I mean, live in a while. So I think it was. So it was been quite a while since I did a live one. So yeah, it was fun to be back on stage and talking about security. This week on Application Security Weekly number 214, John and Mike had Dean Agron on the show. Dean is the CEO and founder at Oxeye and came on to talk releasing secured cloud native applications. So, you know, this is a big deal, and people are starting to put stuff up in the cloud, and they're starting to develop in the cloud and have been developing. And so they had to talk about runtime and infrastructure needs, how to focus on vulnerabilities, and using all the right remediation forms and all this kind of stuff when you're doing cloud, dependent apps. In the second segment, the AppSec news. On Business Security Weekly number 279, Matt, Josh, John, and Tyler had on Dr. Chuck Gardner, the Senior Director of Government and Nonprofit Engagement at cyber.org. Dr. Gardner was on to talk about cyber.org in general, and in particular, they were talking about a component of cyber.org called Project Access, which is a really cool project. It was a nationwide effort that is ongoing that focuses on expanding capabilities for blind and vision impaired students between 13 and 21. And I've had several vision impaired students down through the years, and I still remember a person I had in a RPG programming class a long time ago who was completely blind and could not see at all. And it was amazing, the effort that had to be put in for that person to be able to write RPG and debug RPG code. They also talked about CTAP grants, which is a component of that program, and cyber.org camps, which focused on newcomers with vision impairment. So a great segment to check out, and maybe if it's something you want to get involved in or something you care about, definitely worth your time. In the second segment, the leadership and communication news. On Enterprise Security Weekly 291, Tyler Shields, and Katie brought on Ryan Freed, Senior Security Engineer at Brooks Running. Ryan was talking about a simple, free method to use a quantitative approach to begin prioritizing what initiatives will be completed in the upcoming year. So this was, of course, a planning initiative to try and decide what we're going to correct or we're going to modify and so forth. The model they were talking about used the CIS controls. So if you're probably familiar with that, but if you're not, you can check those out. That's another control set that that lists all these different controls you should put in place. But they also were talking about how to use those CIS controls with input from the frontline analysts and engineers, which sounds like common sense, but it's amazing how often none of that happens. I know when I used to go out and look at that stuff, it was amazing how often decisions were made, and they never bothered to talk to the people that were either impacted by the decisions or would be responsible for implementing them, and that was why a lot of stuff failed. So poor management. In the second segment, Tim Morris, financial services strategist at Tanium, was on. They were basically starting from the idea of CISA Cybersecurity Month theme, which the theme was "See Yourself in Cyber," like alliteration made easy. See yourself in cyber. And I thought they should have spelled it with a C, like the letter C. Like see yourself in cyber. Yeah, the marketing people never got back to me. But they talked about the lines blurring between, and this is a very interesting topic to me, the lines blurring between personal and work accounts and devices, MFA risks and types of MFA and a bunch of things like that. So the segment that was very interesting, especially if you're managing remote workers, which I'm almost certain that you are, because I think everyone is now. In the third segment, the enterprise security news. On Security Weekly News number 244, Jason talked about the LA school data leaks, the double exploit, or the double extortion. The double extortion data leaks after they refused to pay the ransom for their systems, and that was a big deal. They leaked all this student data, student psych profiles, all kinds of stuff. So very serious thing there. On Pulse Security Weekly number 758, Ang Sui, who is amazing, does very, very cool stuff. And Ang is the founder and CEO at Red Balloon in New York. And they are hiring, by the way. He mentioned that during this segment. So if you're looking for a job, especially in the firmware side, check out their site. The segment was about a lot of firmware stuff, and which is a little esoteric. It's very interesting stuff to a lot of people. But they were talking about firmware and how that can impact critical infrastructure devices and things like that. He also talked about some of the crazy and dangerous experiments they've done with all sorts of liquid nitrogen and things like that, and some of his presentations and YouTube videos that have been on before. To me, the fact that Ang rides a bike in Manhattan, is probably like why he has no fear of anything else on Earth, because there's not many things more dangerous than riding a bike through Manhattan. He also drank brandy from a plumbus, so that was epic. And so if anybody wants to send me a brandy-filled plumbus, I can fill it with my own brandy, thank you very much. But I was like, wow, I saw it in the background. I was like, is that a plumbus? And he was like, yeah. It even had a Szechuan sauce sticker on it, so, In the second segment, the cybersecurity news. My thread of the week is going to be deepfakes. This article that I put up really caught my eye. We talked about it a little bit on Pulse Security Weekly. And there were several other stories this week about deepfakes, and we've talked about deepfakes before. But I thought this one was particularly interesting, since what they found was that an AI could detect deepfakes by using the sound, so the audio portion that was coming out of the deepfake's mouth, and they took that and they mapped the physical vocal tract during speech. And, so this is all the different components of your body that determine how weird your voice sounds. Now, I used to cannot stand to hear myself because, a lot of it's a common thing is like you hear your voice recorded and you go, ugh, that sounds awful. And maybe it just sounds awful, but most of the time now I only hear my voice in headphones, so they've been processed or speakers. I've gotten kind of used to it after doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcasts and virtual meetings and online classes and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, they said that deepfake vocals often map to impossible physiologies. So like one of the examples was an esophagus the size of a drinking straw. Yeah, my esophagus felt like that one time when I had strep throat, but I mean, generally, it wouldn't be that small, or a mouth the size of a ping pong ball or something like that. So I guess, they were trying, so they started this project, but they were trying to figure out what a dinosaur might have sounded like by mapping the body cavities and organs and then projecting sound through, I don't know, how big is a dinosaur esophagus, like, the size of my leg. But they were pushing sounds through there with AI to try and see if they could do that. But they found out that they could actually identify deepfakes in this same process. So in this particular case, they were able to identify deepfakes in 99.5% of their samples using the same technique in reverse. And of course, this means that the deepfakers will have to try harder. So, with their AIs, and instead of just using, I was presuming that the deepfakes were focusing on quality of voice rather than on trying to generate realistic sounding human voices. So they'll probably have to put more constraints around their humans. And then I guess we'll all have to have CAT scans or something to determine the size and shape of our organs and pipes, so they can be like a biometric analysis of your body, so they know how your liver is affecting the sound of your voice. And then we can be shape mapped back onto a template so that our security system can figure out if the message from us is fake. I mean, deepfakes are becoming really common approaches to phishing and other threats. So they have audio deepfakes where they're just mimicking the voices of important people. Maybe it's your boss's voice that they're imitating. But they can use they use this stuff for everything from political assassinations to and I don't mean assassinations like bang bang assassinations, but I mean like character destruction and whatever, to convincing employees a message is legit by faking a video call from your boss's boss telling you to change the damned account number on that transfer and do it right now. And I mean, it is scary. I've seen several examples of these being used where they were deep faking various public figures, or they were deep faking just individuals at a company. And, a few years ago, there was a lot of outcry about sort of early proto deep fakes that were being used to put celebrities' faces on porn stars and such like that. And I know they still do that. So they have all fake photographs and fake pornography and all this kind of stuff with, celebrities that have never done pornography or whatnot. But the tech has really progressed at this point to looking, sounding, behaving like the fakeee in the video. And so, more worrisome to me about this than the idea of celebrities being exploited. Sorry, celebrities, but I mean, it is part of it. But how do you know that this is real, and could this be used as a means to discredit an individual? I mean, as this technology becomes available to you in person, to individuals, not some lab at MIT, but just that it's a widely available technology, you could use this to just target people. I mean, I've had students in the past produce fake emails from doctors, that said, hey, they were sick and they couldn't come to class and take the test. But I've also had fake emails produced by students that claimed I said something I didn't say. A student once took a totally fake email and took it to the IT group at the university where I worked and said, he said this about you. And and they got very rightfully upset. If I had said what the student said that I said, they would be right to be angry, but I didn't say it, and I didn't send that email, but the student was trying to cause problems for me. So, what if there's a fake video of you saying something incredibly offensive on camera? I mean, there's plenty of real videos of me saying something offensive on camera, so I'm not too worried. Well, I kind of am, but I mean, imagine how this works when some politician you don't like hires a company to produce, something that is a game changer. Like quoting Hitler or something. Oh, wait, that actually happens all the time in real life. We have some politicians now that are like, how is this person getting any votes? But, we have that kind of stuff for the people. I saw this article today about people that believe that schools are putting out litter boxes for children. And I was literally going, what? They said that there were, that children who identify as furries were being provided with litter boxes in woke schools. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And, but of course I was like, I'm going to check that out. Surely not. And of course it's total nonsense, but all these politicians have been saying it. So, I mean, what if someone who wouldn't normally quote Hitler or buy into these ridiculous conspiracy theories, was suddenly, a YouTube video or a TikTok or whatever of that person speaking, or even just one of those found footage kind of, cell phone videos of an important politician, or maybe even somebody who's just running for dog catcher is suddenly put up as like, well, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't vote for this guy. This is what he said at the school board meeting, and I mean, I'm a huge fan of AI research, and I'm a huge fan of artificial intelligence and all this stuff. And this research that these guys did was awesome. I mean, it's amazing research, but it's not going to change the long run. I mean, being able to detect this, you can detect Photoshop pictures of me playing disc golf with Kim Jong-un, and it was a pretty good picture, but, you could detect the problems and so forth. But although common sense should have told you that it was a lot more likely I was hanging out with Kim Jong-un than I was playing disc golf, but you get the idea. But I mean, is this actually a picture of Natalie Portman, or is it a fake? The lines keep getting more complicated to discern. I mean, to me, with deepfake technologies more and more available, and it may well be possible soon for just people on the fly to create, like those jib jab videos that they used to make with people's faces that were kind of silly, but you may be able to create all sorts of things that may be almost impossible to evaluate. I mean, I tried some of these, and I actually tried Natalie Portman with Kim Jong-un playing disc golf on DALL-E. And DALL-E seems to resist anything that has celebrities' names in it, but it did not resist things that had other people's names. So if I just went and picked, people that there were pictures of online, I did get results back. I mean, how about Kim Kardashian dating Pete Davidson? I mean, that would be ridiculous. I think that actually happened, but I mean, I'm just not sure anymore. But I do think this is a huge threat. There were a lot of articles this week about threats, disinformation, misinformation threats to the U.S. elections coming up in November. I think this is a huge threat to any politician, regardless of their position. Maybe they want to be seen talking about Hitler, because some of them apparently do. But there's always people that would not want to be seen, saying what a Hitler, what a mensch. But I mean, if I have a video of a teacher, then I can say that says this exam is optional. How are they going to assess that? And I mean, I think that stuff is coming. I mean, what about a teacher saying something offensive on a video? I mean, how do you defend yourself from this? I mean, if students start taking videos to the high school principal and saying this is what he said in class, is that high school principal going to be able to somehow determine that this is fake footage? I mean, what's the rule going to be? Are they going to have to go through several steps of validation? We're all used to found footage, and, it's going to really get ugly, I think, before we find a way to solve this. An AI to detect an AI meddling in human affairs. Okay, that's definitely how you get Skynet, no doubt. I mean, so all it's going to take is that one line of code that says, like optimize, and then, Skynet's like, got it, exterminate. Yeah, that that's how you get Daleks too. All right, and now the news. Enough. I could go on. I won't, I promise. So this week, a joint report by CISA, the NSA, and the FBI, Alphabet Soup, all of those are U.S. agencies, released a report on Thursday which listed the top security vulnerabilities used by the People's Republic of China. I talk about specific, but the vulnerabilities used by the People's Republic of China to target government and infrastructure since 2020. Some of the biggies on there, I mean, there was a whole list of these things. Some of them, one of the big ones was Log4j, Pulse Connect Secure, Atlassian exchange vulnerabilities, and they were almost all remote code executions, which makes a lot of sense since the people in China are not necessarily inside of the building. But the entire list is in the article, so if you're interested in seeing which vulnerabilities top their list, most of these CVEs, in fact, maybe all of them, have been patched or have mitigations that are available, but you have to use them. And of course, we've seen struggles with that, where people are not patching, they're not updating and doing the things that they need to do, or that their time frame for patching is so long. The release did include some mitigation measures that they recommended, which included applying security patches as soon as possible. Thanks, guys. Use multi-factor authentication whenever possible. Well, that's a good one. And replace end-of-life network infrastructure, which no longer receives security patches. And I'm not even making fun of their recommendations. It's just sort of, I guess I'm making fun of the fact that they have to make these recommendations. So if you're hanging on to that old Pix 515 firewall, or you've still got Windows XP, well, say, 你好我的中国友邦. Yuban? I gotta get the tone right. Yuban? Yeah, there it went. That means, welcome, my Chinese friends. A new piece of malware is targeting Microsoft SQL servers. The malware apparently is named Maggie. I was like, what? Who's naming these things? But it's apparently named Maggie, and they have reported hundreds of infections around the world. The malware is a series of SQL queries which instruct the SQL server to run command and perform file interactions. So it's basically interfacing with a SQL server somehow. It includes capabilities which would allow brute forcing logins and, to other SQL servers that are connected, and it can act as a backdoor into the network. So it's basically allowing the server then to act like a proxy almost. DCSO Scitech in Germany found the malware and stated that it was more prevalent. Once they give the list, it was more prevalent in, listen to this, South Korea, India, Vietnam, China, Russia, Thailand, Germany, and the United States. So I'm like, okay, that really a lot. The malware is in a DLL called SQL Maggie Antivirus 64.dll. Yeah, that sounds like something I would come up with. But it's digitally signed by DeepSoft, which apparently is in South Korea. The malware contains an API that accepts remote arguments once it's up and running, and it has 51 separate commands that could be issued that are all in the article if you want to read them, and 4 of those are specific exploit commands, so they actually are relying on known vulnerabilities for some of the behavior that they want to execute with this malware. There was not any information in the article about how the malware was being distributed, but it looks like one of those, where they inject... you inject the DLL and then side load it maybe with the sys32 DLL or sysman 32 DLL and push it into the system, and then of course that DLL's really just got the API running. And an interesting one. Blackbyte ransomware gang is using a new technique that is being called bring your own driver. Which is a mechanism to, I'm not sure why you don't really bring the driver. It's a mechanism to bypass security software that would detect their ransomware because they disable about 1,000 drivers on the system, and most of those drivers that were being disabled are the ones that are being used by security solutions. So the malware then uses some exploits like MSI after, like the example they had was MSI Afterburner RT Core64.sys driver vulnerabilities. So they actually inject that driver and then use that exploit to do privilege escalation and code execution. And apparently this is a new trend. Apparently Lazarus was abusing a buggy Dell driver. We talked about that story, I think, on Security Weekly. Sophos was providing this explanation of how this worked. They have a full example of this MSI graphics driver attack, and they did show how it was dropping RT Core64.sys in app data / roaming, and then creates a service to execute that malware. So Blackbyte gang's been pretty active lately. There's quite a few other attacks we've seen, and they were using similar methods, although not necessarily the same driver exploits to do this. So something that's out there. Avast released a decryptor for variants of Mafiaware666 ransomware, which is also known as JCrypt, RIP LMAO, and Brutus PT Crypt, which means, if you do have one of these variants, you may be able to get your files back without paying. Avast said they found a security flaw in the encryption scheme, which allowed some variants to be unlocked, but went on to say that their, new and unknown sample variants may have been adapted to avoid this break that they have. Mafiaware666 is typically asking for $50 to $300 US or euros, but it can actually be in the tens of thousands depending on who the target is. The article does contain complete instructions for how to use this decryptor, so if you've had problems with Mafiaware, you may want to check this out. If you're using laptops with Intel 12 Gen core processors, that's a Dell Lake, I think, you may want to hold off on Linux 5.19.12. Apparently, it is Alder Lake. I wrote it later. Apparently, the Alder Lake chip group, which is the 12 Gen, and the newest Linux kernel that just came out don't get along very well. So it may result, according to this, in flashing strobe effects, flickering screens, or the display may just fail altogether and not work. Vil Sirjala, sorry, Vil, I'm sure I butchered that, released a warning that said, quote, after looking at some logs, we do end up with potentially bogus panel power sequencing delays, which may harm the LCD panel. Greg, I recommend the immediate revert of this stuff and new stable release, plus a recommendation that no one using laptops with Intel GPUs run 5.19.12. Framework laptops of storied fame on PSW, they all love them. And note, Framework people, I have not gotten my Framework laptop yet. So, if you need my address, just hit me up. I'll be happy to comply. But Framework issued a warning to its users about this. Stable kernel leak, Greg referenced in the other quote, from Ville. Greg Croa Hartman has released kernel 5.19.13, which does fix the issue. So you should update if you're one of those people that pushes new kernels on your Linux all the time. Most of the big box Linux distros are not using the 5.19 kernel yet anyway, and kernel 6.0 is already around. So it may be a sort of a fleeting issue. But Ubuntu's intermediate release for this year, which should come out in October, is expected to have 5.19, but it's very likely that they went ahead and patched up to .13 so that wouldn't affect this. But it's probably time to type uname minus SRM if you haven't typed that lately and see what you're running. Meta, the Facebook parent company, warned 1 million or so Facebook users this morning that they have been exposed to a seemingly innocuous smartphone app that they didn't name that will steal passwords for Facebook. I was kind of frustrated they didn't name what it was. But then they went on to say, this year, Meta has identified over 400 of these apps, which are often available, legitimately on the Apple and the Google stores, disguised as handy tools. So photo editors, games, VPNs, it could be literally anything, and they usually function. The big tip-off, of course, in this, if you have any app that you've installed that asks you to log into your Facebook credentials or any other credentials for that matter, obviously these apps then tell you that you're going to get a lot more features and a better experience if you allow this app to access your Facebook friends and your Facebook photographs and all this kind of stuff. Be careful about that, because when you give up those credentials, Apple apparently did not respond to an inquiry on this, but Google basically said that most of the apps they had listed had already been flagged and identified and removed. But basically, don't use apps that use these cross-platform logins. I mean, I know it makes sense and it seems easy, but it's a very, very dangerous game. So keep that in mind as you install apps on your devices, even if they're coming from legitimate sources, because it's very simple to embed this stuff and capture credentials. And finally, this story really hit home for me, and probably for all of you as well. You ever had that dreaded phone call from some distant relative, or my dad? I would have done anything. My dad is deceased, but I would have done anything for my dad because I knew he would do anything for me. But boy, did I dread those calls, which basically assumed that since I was a programmer at the bank, that I could pretty much do just about anything. If there's a blinking light, it was working, and then smoke came out of this, and it stopped, and I figured you could take a look. And I'm like, Dad, that's an adding machine from 1974. I don't know anything about that. I probably can't fix it. My dad, that kind of stuff. I think one of my favorites of all time was this parent showed up at my office at school, and they said, I've got this MacBook, and the screen got broken when it was dropped. I was thinking you'd probably enjoy repairing it for fun. You think you could get it fixed up by next week? And I was like, what? And it was like, well, I thought you'd probably enjoy doing this, just some, fun work to do in your spare time. I was like, $5,000. I was like, I could solder, I've had people ask me if I could come over and fix some circuit or something. I never met Lou's rigorous soldering standards. He tested your solders with a multimeter and all this stuff. And I was like, just slap it on there. It'll be fine. He's like, no, desolder it and start again. But, it did make me think of all the weird things people have called down to the desk and asked for, or some distant relative I've never met in my whole life call me and ask for, or people that thought that because, I was a sysop on the mainframe, the old DEC 10 could do pretty much anything, including bring their pets back to life, or, is it possible to, plug a refrigerator? Somebody asked me if you could plug a refrigerator into it, and, and managers that call down there and they're like, why can't I get printouts in color? And I'm like, we don't have a printer like that. And, they're like, well, if you just take the time to do your goddamn job, we wouldn't, and you're like, wait a minute, I didn't decide that. But anyway, that's a wrap up for the week of 2nd November 2022. I'm Doug White, and I will see you next week.